This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. The United States has become a global crude oil exporting power over the last few years, but exports have not exceeded its imports since World War II. That could change next year. Sales of U.S. crude to other nations are now a record 3.4 million barrels per day, BPD, with exports of about 3 million barrels of oil per day of refined products like gasoline and diesel fuel. The United States is also the leading liquefied natural gas, LNG, exporter, where growth is expected to soar in coming years. But the United States consumes 20 million barrels of crude a day, the most in the world, and its output has never exceeded 13 million barrels of oil per day. Until recently, the idea that it would be anything but a big crude importer was folly.
Oil prices inched higher on Tuesday, supported by a softer dollar and a U.S. plan to restock petroleum reserves. But gains were capped by uncertainty over the impact of rising COVID-19 cases in top oil importer China. Brent crude futures were up 15 cents, or 0.2%, at $79.95 a barrel at 0710 GMT, adding to a 76-cent gain in the previous session. U.S. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude futures rose 32 cents, or 0.4%, to $75.51 a barrel, after climbing 90 cents in the previous session. Both contracts rose by more than $1 earlier in the session.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Asia is expected to be flooded with more fuel oil supplies in 2023 as Kuwait's new Al Zour refinery ramps up output and as Russia diverts record volumes from Europe to the east ahead of sanctions. Higher supplies are expected to weigh on Asia's fuel oil prices and refiners' margins next year amid steady demand from the ship fueling and power generation sectors. The 615,000 barrels per day Al Zour refinery, which started exporting products in November, is poised to be a major supplier of very low sulfur fuel oil, VLSFO, commonly used for ship refueling, known as bunkering.
China's independent refiners are boosting their profits from processing low-priced Russian oil as Western sanctions on Moscow give them leverage to negotiate for steeper discounts, industry sources and analysts said. The Group of Seven, G7, nations introduced a ceiling price of $60 a barrel for Russian oil from December 5 and the European Union banned Russian seaborne imports to limit Moscow's ability to finance its war in Ukraine. That has prompted Russia to divert its westbound crude to Asia at steeper discounts.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
Global primary aluminium output in November rose 3.8% year-on-year to 5.611 million tons, data from the International Aluminium Institute, IAI, showed on Tuesday. Estimated Chinese production was 3.311 million tons in November, the IAI said.
Chinese coking coal futures dropped more than 3% on Tuesday, extending losses as supply of the steelmaking input might increase if and when Beijing lifts trade sanctions against Australia. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong was set to push China to lift trade sanctions during this week's trip to Beijing aimed at mending strained diplomatic ties. Relations between Beijing and Canberra soured after Australia introduced laws to deal with what it said was Chinese interference in Australian politics, and called for an independent investigation into the origins of COVID-19. We will now look at the top news in the agricultural. Chicago soybean futures edged higher on Tuesday, recouping some losses from the previous session, although improved weather in key parts of Argentina and Brazil limited gains. Wheat fell for a third session. Argentina's rainfall outlook has improved, an agricultural analyst said. The outlook is for some more improvement to occur, but additional follow-up rainfall will be imperative to induce a true trend change. The most active soybean contract on the Chicago Board of Trade, CBOT, added 0.3% to $14.65 one quarter a bushel. As of 0318 GMT, corn rose 0.1% to $6.48 one quarter a bushel, while wheat WV1 lost 0.1% to $7.47 1/2 a bushel.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.